Well, welcome everybody to our the start of our 2020-2021 season. A few months ago, we didn't think this would be necessary. I guess we were hoping, certainly as a club and as a country, that we wouldn't be dealing with this any longer, but we are. We'll remain, TBFC, I guess, will remain partially closed as we go through the fall. I can tell you that USF has closed all non-academic activities on campus. Of course, that being our monthly home. We don't have nowhere to meet right now. So we will either do virtual meetings or possibly entertain, maybe looking at some outdoor venues. As the October comes, the weather may be a little less wet in the evening and also maybe cool enough, not cold, but cool enough where we could sit outside and not sweat through our britches to watch something outdoors. So we'll just move forward as best we can. Please help TBFC stay afloat during these times. Keep your membership up to date so you can continue getting the cool newsletters. I think that's the first time a whale skull, a toothed whale skull in Florida has been pictured anywhere. First one, I think, found complete. If you got a newsletter, you have that. Keep your membership up to date. Online, you'll see Cena Searle is still selling some of the Fossil Fest t-shirts online. There are plenty of those available. Long sleeve too?
Very few.
We have a few of the long sleeve t-shirt hoodies, which all the cool people like. You can email her to find out what's left in the sizes on that. Leslie is trying to sell some books online. Having a little bit of trouble with that, but she'll get it worked out as best she can. And we may start some simple one-piece auctions online or something just to keep people keep their competitive spirits up. I know you guys miss arguing and bidding against each other in the auctions that we've missed so far. I want to thank Eileen Durkin. She took herself off the screen, but Eileen has she got the website back up and running just a couple days ago. So we do have a new website that's operational now. We will get the calendar fixed on that. Well, not fixed, but more active with Marlon and Fred for field trips. And we also should have a monthly update on that as well. I want to thank Cena and Leslie for continuing to try to sell some stuff online on Facebook. And thanks to those folks who helped me out with the newsletter. Dr. Bob, of course, he writes his normal routine articles for us and some extras. He has a good article coming up in the next newsletter on 5 amateurs associated with a club who've had species named after them in a recent publication. Also thank Rob Carlson. He started a new column called, forgot the name, about inverts. I forgot the name of the column. But that'll be in each month's newsletter as well. Field trips, Marlon has reported that all the mines are still closed and will remain closed through the fall. That leaves us only with the Peace River trip with Fred Hendershot and Carissa, his daughter, leading those. He did change the Saturday to I think the third Saturday. It is in the newsletter. Of course, that would be with water conditions allowing. It's still September. It's still raining every day. We do hope for the rain to back off a little bit come October. And hopefully you folks can get safely and socially distanced together in the rivers, hunting again and finding some cool stuff, which I know is a lot about why you guys are in the club. I know the divers are still in some of the rivers. Be safe out there. The water's moving pretty quick. As of now, we do have a contract for Fossil Fest in 2021. That is on March 20th and 21st. Who knows? We'll see. Will there be a vaccine? Will this thing disappear? I don't know. I can't tell you. I give these guys a lot of credit. The Florida Fossil Hunters. They are having their show October 10th and 11th in Sanford, Florida. I'll get this posted on our Facebook page. If you don't normally make the trek up I-4 to Sanford to see their show, please do it this year. They're going to need the support. I'm sure they're going to be operating under some strict mandates on mask, distancing, probably less tables allowed in the venue. Please try to get up there and visit these folks and buy a little something, get a ticket. It's only $4 to get into their show. Maybe you could kick in an extra $1 or $2. They're not asking for that, but maybe you could kick in an extra $1 or $2 when you come in and or round it up as some of the places do for the good folks in the neighborhood. But yeah, please try to get up there, and I'll put this up on the fossil page, or Facebook page. I'm sorry. That is all the announcements I think I have. Am I missing anything? My wife's sitting here, but she won't get in front of the camera. We have Pete Larson for the Black Hills Institute here tonight. He was very kind to join with us with not much notice, only about a week. I didn't have time between the cancellation of the in-person meetings and this date, today's date, to get somebody. And you'd be surprised how many people seem to be busy when they're not supposed to be going out anywhere. But I know a lot of folks are doing webcam and Zoom type meetings around the country. Pete Larson started the Black Hills Institute when he was, I've seen pictures of him about 10 years old with his first museum started. If you haven't read the books on the T-Rex Zoo, if you haven't seen Dinosaur 13, you have to watch him. It's a remarkable journey of triumph and tragedy on how he got to where he is today in his research. I doubt he's going to talk about that tonight. He doesn't seem to dwell on it, which is good. But you got to check out Dinosaur 13. It's really, really a great movie, documentary style movie. No one in history, to my knowledge, from what I read online, has found more T-Rex than Pete Larson and his crew. The title of the movie Dinosaur 13 was because that was the 13th T-Rex, arguably complete T-Rex that was found. And he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. On several occasions, and I know he don't remember, 10, 20 years ago, when we started going out to the Nebraska Badlands, we'd stop into his Black Hills Institute and ask if Pete was around, and if somebody could give us a tour or show us around. They would always tell us that Pete's too busy, Neil's too busy, they can't do it. But we'll show you something. And then Pete or Neil would see us and they'd come talk to us. Then they start showing us something. Then they start telling us stories. The next thing you know, 2 hours would go by when these guys were too busy to see us to begin with, and they spent a 2-hour tour through the back of their shop with us. And I've never seen anybody as free with their research. We were there one time, coincidentally, on a day they were rolling in a jacket with Triceratops skin fossilized. And when first he said, well, we better not show it to nobody. Then he showed us. Well, don't tell nobody. Well, you can tell your friends. Don't take no pictures. Well, don't take many pictures. Well, don't publish it anywhere. Well, I don't care if you put it in your newsletter. And this is before the guy even had a chance to publish it himself. And we didn't. I think Bill Fosher later wrote something about it, but he just couldn't resist sharing the find with us and amateurs and others. So Pete, we're very happy to have you here tonight. I'm going to turn the meeting over to you guys, or to you, I'm sorry, reminding everybody that Pete is 2,000 miles from Tampa in the Black Hills of South Dakota, where there's almost no phone signal around every corner. So if he freezes a little bit, if he stutters in his volume, we'll work through it. We'll get it all done. Welcome to Tampa, Pete.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's really great to be here. Well, sort of here. This is sort of a new experience for me to give a talk via Zoom. Usually I get to see the audience and see when they start picking up the tomatoes. I know when to change the subject, but so I'll just have to kind of guess what people are more interested in. The talk I'm going to give today is one that I actually prepared for the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meeting for a special symposium that they were having that was organized by a fellow from Germany. This was last October in Australia. I couldn't go to Australia, it was just too expensive. So I sent basically a video recording of this talk. Commercial collectors, people like myself who make their living by selling fossils, get good stuff into museums, but we are kind of considered the black sheep by some American paleontologists, mostly vertebrate paleontologists. Of course, this selling of fossils has actually been going on for not tens of years, not hundreds of years, but thousands of years. As long as people have had an interest in the science of paleontology, or have had an interest in nature and finding something, picking something up, these curious stones that look like almost like living organisms, people have been interested in fossils, and they've exchanged them, they've bartered them, they've actually changed money, has changed hands in trade for these fossils. And it's the way private collectors a lot of times can build their collections into more than what they're actually able to pick up themselves. This curiosity for nature, this particular museum, the Worms Museum, this is an illustration that was made in 1655, showing all these curious objects. Included within it are fossils. And it just shows you that museums really owe their existence to amateur collectors and to people who collect fossils, collect so many of them that they have to sell them as well because they don't have room to keep them all. And people who trade fossils. And so these began most all of the natural history museums that are around today. It's who have allowed these specimens to be saved, and they've been saved for science just because we've collected them, we've saved them from nature. Things like the dragon bones, quotes, the dragon bones that were found in China that are used even today as for medicinal purposes, where they would dig up fossils and grind them up and would sell them to help cure illnesses. These were they found these fossils that they ground up for medicine, have produced over the last century some really, really cool fossils. This is one of the Pliocene localities, and these are some of the things in our collection that were that we had purchased before 2004 when they stopped fossils. Record something that's very close to my heart that is similar to things like we collect in the Brule Formation, the White River Badlands of South Dakota and Nebraska, and where Mike and Sienna are very used to going out and picking up fossils very similar to these. But it turns out that the area where I am from, the Lakota, the people who before the white man came, some of these medicine bags have been saved over the years. And in the medicine bags, interestingly enough, they often find fossils, these curious things. So it is something that I think all of humanity has had a curiosity, a scientific curiosity about these natural objects that remind us of living things. And they remind us of living things, of course, because they're the remnants of things which once were alive. In Great Britain, there's been a whole tradition for hundreds of years of picking up ammonites, and they carve a little head on the end of it, and they're called snake stones. These snake stones were traded around by peoples from various parts of Great Britain, and they even made it sometimes into France and into the European continent. There's some really, really kind of cool things that they've done with some of these fossils, trying to, I guess you would say, scientifically interpret what they were. Of course, everybody knows the story of Mary Anning. She sells seashells by the seashore. Mary Anning was a preeminent paleontologist, of course, self-taught. She would collect with her brother along the coast. She had a much more fortitude than her brother, because her brother kind of went on to different things that we know had the beginnings of our knowledge about what was occurring around Lyme Regis and all the plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs and fossil fishes and ammonites and things that she was able to collect. And even pterosaurs have been found at this locality. Without her work, the specimens wouldn't have been, of course, because of the natural forces of weathering. So these specimens are in museums all over Great Britain and all also in Europe, the ones that she collected. And she did it and made money, made a living by it. Of course, fossils have been collected for much longer than the 1800s. Here we see just sort of a depiction of something that has been known from Lebanon for many, many years. And I'm just going to read this because it's a little bit hard to memorize. So this Palestine, Eusebius of Caesarea, the author writes in his Armenian Chronicles, which is in the 3rd century. So this is 200 and something AD. And here I'll quote, of course, this mountains is for me the truth. And I say that the witness of my eyes confirms it, for I have seen certain fishes which were found in my lifetime on the highest peaks in Lebanon. They took stones from there for construction and discovered many kinds of sea fishes, which were held together in the quarry with mud. And as if pickled in brine, were preserved until our times of Noah's flood. Of course, they were there. That was the only way that they had to explain them. Some of the earliest illustrations of these fossils. This one was made in 1786. And there's some even earlier scientific illustrations where they were finally being described. Well, this locality has produced truly some wonderful fossil fishes and even some pterosaur material, some fossil turtles, and I believe even a fossil lizard, Cenomanian, so it's late Cretaceous, sort of middle late Cretaceous, a very important fauna of a lagoonal deposit that has been preserved and has been dug here. Another site that has been known for a long, long time is a site called Montebolka in Italy. Here we have, again, some beautiful marine fishes. These marine fishes have been collected and they've actually been mined. There's underground mines to collect these fossils, which occur on the southern side of the Alps. But this particular one, Mini Rhomba, shows you the beautiful tropical fishes that are, so they're about 50 million years old. Have done fossils while they're actually doing, have discovered fossils, sorry, while they're actually doing something different. This is the Gutenberg Bible printed in 1455. And in order to print this, they made printing plates, which were made from the Solnhofen limestone. The Solnhofen limestone splits in very, very thin layers, and they're able to make these printing plates by carving into the plate and then using them as today. But from this, we have also the use of building stone, and even today they're still digging it. Digging it for building stone that surfaces the face of many airports. When I walk around some of the airports, even in Minneapolis, we see some of the Solnhofen limestone on the floor with ammonites in cross-section and belemnites in cross-section. It's a pretty cool thing to see these fossils, which have come from Germany and are now on the floor of the airport in Minneapolis. But in addition to belemnites and ammonites and fossil fishes, there's also some pretty remarkable flying reptiles. And of course, the most famous fossils of all, Archaeopteryx. As you all know, Archaeopteryx is that first bird that Indian dinosaurs, the link between dinosaurs and birds, between the one that tells us that that T-Rex is a close relative of the hummingbird, which always just kind of amazes me to think about. Another building stone locality in Germany is the Poseidon Shale, and this occurs near the town of Holzmaden. From this have come some just wonderful ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, and just a fantastic array of crinoids and ammonites and fossil fishes. We know so much about the Jurassic because people take rocks and use them for building stones of one shape or another. This houses, it's been used for even pool tables. One of the, I guess, kind of getting Klingberg, who was born in 1850 and began collecting fossils in 1875 and continued probably until his death in 1940. This guy started basically a fossil dynasty because he worked with his sons, Levi, Charles, and George Sternberg as well. But in his earlier years, he actually collected with Edward Drinker Cope and O.C. Marsh. And of course, John Bell Hatcher. He taught John Bell Hatcher how to collect. This guy is the first guy who used plaster of Paris and burlap to encase fossils to get them out of the ground more safely. Before that, the best people could do was with rice paper and flour paste. So this guy really, really changed the way paleontology works and the way paleontologists collect fossils. And he worked also in the Red Deer River Badlands. There are two really cool books, if you can get a hold of them, or they're probably online. One is called The Life of a Fossil Hunter by Charles Sternberg, and the other one is Hunting Dinosaurs on the Red Deer River. This particular photograph was taken when he was working in the Badlands on the Red Deer River and found the type of Gorgosaurus. He is also the guy who found this wonderful mummy that's at the American Museum of Natural History. This is a mummified Edmontosaurus annectans, one of the duck-billed dinosaurs. And this dinosaur apparently laid on the surface and dried out so that the meat collapsed, and all you had left was the skin that was preserved onto the bones. And you can actually see the texture of the skin, how it changes over the body of this animal. And it's because of his work that we know this. He found a second, actually two other mummy dinosaurs in the Lance Creek beds of the Lance Formation in Wyoming. And one is at the Senckenberg Museum in Germany, and the other one was sank to the bottom of the sea during World War II. So kind of or World War I, sorry, kind of a sad thing that happened to that dinosaur. He made his last expedition in 1928 when he went down to the Baja in Mexico collecting fossils museums and sold them to these museums. The Natural History Museum in London, of course, the museum in Senckenberg, the American Museum of Natural History in New York, the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, and the Canadian National Museum. And of course, in these later years, he worked with the Natural History Museum in San Diego. But truly a prolific person who found some really wonderful and remarkable fossils in his time. And he did it all on his own dime, and the museums paid him, actually purchased the specimens from him. One of the things places that he worked extensively, and his son George in later years, was in the Niobrara Chalk. Here's a wonderful mosasaur that Fred Nuss, another friend of ours who sells fossils, collected in Kansas in the Niobrara Chalk. This one is in our museum, and it's got some pretty cool things like shark teeth all over it, shark bites all over it, and one actually shark tooth embedded in the neck of this Tylosaurus. So just an interesting digression here. Charles Sternberg's son, George Sternberg, collected with Marion Bonner. And I became friends with Marion Bonner and actually went out to a site in the Kansas Chalk with Marion Bonner. So I was able to collect with Marion Bonner, who collected with George Sternberg, who collected with Charles Sternberg, who collected with both Cope and Marsh, which is kind of a cool thing. It's sort of like 5 degrees from Kevin Bacon. In the Kansas Chalk, we've found, the Black Institute has found some pretty cool things. This is a pterosaur skull, Pteranodon engines, Pteranodon Sternberg eye, one that I was lucky enough to find, where I found the tips of the beak. You can see the upper and lower jaws here. The tips of the beak were sticking out of the ground, and dumped back and found the skull and one cervical vertebra. Obviously bitten off by somebody because there's some damage to the skull. Another guy who collects in the Kansas chalk, another friend of ours, is Mike Trebold. And Mike has found some pretty fantastic fossils in his time, but probably the one that will really amazed me was this chalk of Ichthyornis. Ichthyornis is one of the toothed birds that was originally described by Marsh. This is there are now only 2 skulls of this known, and Mike found one. This is actually probably the best skull for the species that's ever been found. It's remarkable. The skull itself is only about 2.5 inches long. And so you can imagine, look at the preparation that went into this fossil. It's somebody worked tirelessly to clean this. I think it was Mike Eberhard who actually did the cleaning on this particular fossil. But it even preserves the hyoids. That's the kind of crossed bones down below the lower jaw in the middle of the photograph. One country where literally every fossil that's been found, every fossil that's been described, has been found by people who dig fossils and sell them for money. These wonderful trilobites, which you see kind of on the internet, and if you go to the Tucson show or any of the gem and mineral shows, and these collectors have trained themselves to prepare them in a most marvelous way. They do some of the finest preparation on earth on these trilobites. Of course, not only trilobites that they find there, but they even find, this is one of the Ordovician Mariellas, one of the soft-bodied arthropods that don't preserve under normal circumstances. They're found in the Burgess Shale, and they're found in China and some of the Cambrian deposits. These are just fantastic fossils that would not be preserved, and finding it, and you can see it's been even pieced together. The person who prepared this did an awesome job in preserving this fossil, which is, just super, super rare. Of course, Paul Serino has collected. We know from this site at Kimkim in Morocco. Here, the diggers literally mine dinosaur bones. They mine into these deposits where we have what we would call here in the Hell Creek, we would call them microsites, where you have basically washed in bones that are, scattered about and preserved kind of together because they deltas, and in those deltas we had really cool dinosaurs like this Spinosaur, and interestingly enough, Spinosaurus has been redescribed using several different specimens that have come from Kimkim, which means they're all composites, just everything put together from one, and giving us, and then using the original specimen, which was found 3,000 miles away in Egypt, several million years apart, about 6 million years apart. Kind of a bit of, I think, questionable scientific work to have synonymized them. And they came up with this kind of bizarre looking things with really, really big arms and really small legs and a really long body. But the other Spinosaurs show more, I guess you would say, normal anatomy to where you have a smaller arm and longer back legs and not such quite a long there. We also know from the phosphate mines, this, by the way, is a picture at Black Hills Institute, at the museum at Black Hills Institute. The phosphate mines, in which the collectors trail these giant machines who are grinding up the phosphate for fertilizer. They trail the giant machines, and they set along these picking belts and pick out shark's teeth. But they find some of the most incredible things, like this absolutely wonderful elasmosaur. This is from the very tail end of the age of dinosaurs. It's Maastrichtian age. It's about the same age as Tyrannosaurus rex. And these, of course, are marine guys. The white one in the center of the photograph is this really, really cool elasmosaur from Morocco. But they also find giant turtles, somewhat similar to the Archelon, which you can just see kind of the belly of it up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. These would all be lost. They feed their families. It's an industry that is supported by the king. The king defends them when people try to shut them down, because he knows that they're saving, the king of Morocco, that they're saving these fossils. And virtually everything we know about the paleontology of Morocco for the description of species and stuff is based upon things that were dug by people who sold them to other people. Of course, everybody probably has seen some of these Brazilian fish. Unfortunately, it's illegal to export them from Brazil now. And they've all been kind of stored in one museum, all these wonderful fossil fish, but not just fossil fish. And this, again, is from the late Cretaceous. Hang on a second. It's from the Santana Formation, or the Santana Group. And not only fish, but also flying reptiles. And it's actually been illegal for quite some time for fossils to be exported from, or at least they're saying it was, for quite some time for fossils to be exported from Brazil. These fossils are found in museums all over the world. American Museum of Natural History has some. The museums in Germany and France and Italy have things like this wonderful pterosaur. In fact, this pterosaur is known only because those specimens were collected and sold. But as many of you have heard, in September of 2018, the Natural History Museum in Rio de Janeiro was burned to the ground. And it was burned to the ground with all the fossils, which they put in one basket. So it's a good thing that those fossils, even though they were illegally sold, and I think it's wrong to illegally sell something or to illegally export it, don't get me wrong about that, but it just turns out to be a good thing, because now there are other museums that can supply them with casts or with original fossils to put back in the museum, because now people have stopped digging fossils because they can no longer be sold. So you better be careful what you wish for. If you wish to have no fossils be sold anymore, you may end up with a situation like this where we lose them all. In recent years, we've had some really, really cool stuff coming out of China, as many of you know. This is the beds, the lacustrine and the lake beds near Liaoning, China. And they have produced just some fantastic, fantastic things that are dug by the farmers who don't make much money elsewhere, but can make some money by selling those fossils. It's still legal to sell those fossils, but they can no longer be exported from China. So they all have to remain in China. The beautiful preservation in these lake deposits is just something almost beyond belief. We have feathers, we have claws preserved, the keratinous sheaths on the claws preserved. And if you look closely, you'll notice there is different colorations in the wing as you move down the wing in this fossil. And I can tell you from personal experience that that is because those places are different colored. The lighter areas were actually colored a lighter color, probably white, unless there was some other carotenoid or something else that colored them. But we do know that those dark areas contain eumelanin. And eumelanin can be a dark brown to a almost black. It's the same color if you have brown eyes that you see in your eyes. It's the same color found in people with dark hair. People like me who are now pretty, I've lost most of my eumelanin because my hair is turning white, but there's a little bit left in there, and along with fair melanin, which mine was colored mostly with fair melanin, which are blondes and light browns. It is Liaoning that brought us the first feathered dinosaurs. This is the famous Caudipteryx. It was found only with stones in its belly, which tells us that it probably had a plant diet, even though it was a theropod, what we would normally think of as a meat-eating diet. But it was also found with these weird feather-like things on its tail and on its body. That was the first one that was really recognized as feathers. But we also find little dromaeosaurs, dromaeosaurs with feathers, long flight feathers, not only on their wings, but on their legs, been called four-winged flyers. We don't know exactly how they moved, although there's been some people trying to figure that out. But we do know that they had true feathers, true flight feathers on their wings. So that was a Cretaceous deposit, early Cretaceous. Now we're going to move back into the Eocene of the United States. The Green River Formation, which is again a lake deposit similar to that in Liaoning, also preserves some wonderful fossils. This is a beautiful varanid lizard, sort of like the monitor lizards from the Nile monitor lizards from Africa, or the Komodo dragon. This particular one is not as large as the Komodo dragon, but it's pretty fantastic because you can see there's even scales preserved. Some of the skin is preserved on this beautiful lizard. Of course, what you see down below the lizard's mouth is a fish, Diplomistus. And of course, we know that the Green River is known for fossil fish. There are 5 common fish. And if it weren't for people who dig fossils for a living, who quarry these fossils every summer, we would only know basically those 5 most common fish. We might know a little bit about stingray, which was actually found pretty early on, but all of the larger vertebrates, anything that isn't a fish, any of the mammals, any of the turtles, we would probably not have any information about them because they would never have been found, only because people are digging these fossils and selling them to private collectors and to museums is the only reason we know of them. And all of these wonderful, fantastic, beautiful specimens that you see in museums were collected by private collectors who sold them. We at Black Hills Institute have some really cool things, including this fossil kingfisher. This one has yet to be named, but it's the first fossil kingfisher, and it's out of the Eocene. In fact, we now have more than, I think, 20 taxon of birds that have been found in the Green River Formation. We would know nothing about those birds if it weren't for commercial collectors. And there was a snake found more than 100 years ago that was at the American Museum of Natural History. That has since been lost. That was actually probably found commercially as well. I'm not sure because we don't have much information about it. We don't know where it is, but we do know where 2 other snakes are because they were found, in fact, by the same guy, by Adam Lindgren, Tom Lindgren's son, found both of these snakes. This particular one is now at the Houston Museum of Natural Science in Houston, Texas. We would know nothing of the bats. Here we have, all of a sudden, in the Eocene, bats, a perfectly good bat that came from who knows where. But we have several different species of bats, and there would not be known without these people digging this rock commercially. And we have other mammals like this very, very cool Heractherium, a horse, a fossil horse. This was found by Jim Tinsky. Just really, really wonderful fossils that, again, tell us more about the Eocene than we previously knew. Because, why is this guy out in the lake? That's a pretty interesting thing to think about. Anyway, just kind of digressing again. Another friend of mine, Kirby Sieber, has been collecting dinosaurs at the Hauquar. Kirby is from Switzerland. In this country, we're very lucky because landowners who own their land also own fossils, and Kirby has been allowed to got a lease on the Howe Quarry and dug there for many years, digging up really cool big sauropod dinosaurs and taking them to Switzerland, where he has them on display in his museum. Of course, we have plenty of dinosaurs from the Morrison Formation here in this country too, but he's been able to keep his museum going by selling some of the things he's collected. This is one of the Diplodocus that he collected. This is the one that is actually on exhibit in his museum. His museum is in Attal which is just outside of Zurich, in case any of you ever get there. Also, Kirby is the one who found Big Al, who was within the fence, but turned out to be actually on BLM land. So he turned it over to the BLM, and that is now at the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana. But this is Big Al too, which is at Kirby's museum in Attal, the Dinosaur Museum. And he also found this, the only truly baby sauropod that is known. This is baby Tony, who we all believe is an apatosaur. When we prepared this specimen for Kirby, and when we did, we molded it and then made the back sides of the bones, and we turned it into a free-mounted skeleton. This is my youngest daughter, Ella, who is right now at Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. But these are, I mean, this is truly a baby dinosaur. They're just so cool. Another friend of mine, Clayton Phipps, also known as the dinosaur cowboy, has come upon some really, truly wonderful fossils. This guy is a natural. You're going to hear more from him and more from his son, Luke, because these guys are finding some of the most fantastic fossils that have ever been found. This is only the second complete skull of Nanotyrannus that has been found, and it's attached actually to a body. This is a specimen, an artist's rendition of a specimen called the Dueling Dinosaurs. It was two dinosaurs that were found together, a Triceratops and a Nanotyrannus. And there's really good evidence to tell us that they actually, here's the actual fossils in the ground, that because the tail of one is going under the other, the head of the Nanotyrannus is right next to the foot of the Triceratops, and right between the foot and the head are a pile of teeth, and that skull has been crushed and bent in half, and not crushed vertically in the sediments, but actually crushed in a way that would be perpendicular to vertical. So absolutely, these guys, and we found a dinosaur tooth near the neck of the Triceratops and a dinosaur tooth near the pelvis of the Triceratops as well, that both are Nanotyrannus teeth. And this guy's missing quite a few teeth because he got him mostly bashed out by that foot kicking into him. This is a really interesting site that we think was actually a seismite, the geologic name for sediment that has been altered by a seismic occurrence, by an earthquake. And we think this apparently there was an earthquake that came, Nanotyrannus probably hunted in packs. These guys, two guys killed or nearly killed each other, and an earthquake came, so nobody got eaten, and sucked them down as the sand liquefied with the earthquake. This is the skeleton of the Nanotyrannus, and if you look at the skull, it has been, basically broken in half. But it's a complete skeleton, an absolutely complete skeleton, missing only one claw, and that was lost when it was discovered with the backhoe by while he was trying to Clayton was trying to dig around the Triceratops. This is the skull of the Triceratops. Once it was turned over, it was a very, very old individual. It had its horn broken off, both horns actually broken off and rehealed. It had this big weird growth in front of the eye, a growth on its lip, basically, and it preserves skin on the frill. So we know the frill was covered with skin, not with a keratinous covering like the horn was. Clayton also discovered this little tiny, those are centimeters down below, little tiny Oviraptorid. This is the skull from that specimen, but it has most of the skeleton as well. This one is at the Royal Ontario Museum and will be described very soon. Going back to Mike Tree a little bit in the Hell Creek Formation, which is discovered this really, really cool Stygi Moloch skeleton, which is one of the pachycephalosaurs, and that is now at the Carnegie Museum. Oh, sorry, that one's not at the Carnegie Museum yet. I think that one's at the National Museum in Tokyo. This, however, Anzu Wiley, also discovered by Fred Nuss, the guy who found that mosasaur I showed you earlier, but was collected by Mike Treble. It was a composite of 2 specimens found very close together. This specimen is now at the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh. Mike also found this undescribed or yet to be described Daspletosaurus out of the Judith River Formation in Montana. This particular one is now at the Cincinnati Museum. This is a horned dinosaur that was discovered by an amateur, Bill Shipp, who owned the land. And he got Chris Ott and Black Hills Institute involved, and we were able to prepare this skull, and it also has a partial skeleton. It turned out to be a brand new Judithian dinosaur, and it was named Spiclypius shipporum in honor of Bill Shipp and his brother, who owned the land. One of my favorite dinosaurs, also a Tyrannosaur, is this Gor Saurus specimen. This is at the Children's Museum. This particular specimen is very, very cool because it has all kinds of injuries. It literally has an injured and broken part of the femur and an injured and broken fibula on the other side, healed, of course, or at least partially healed. It has an injured toe. It's got you can see on the shoulder girdle on the side that you're looking at on the left side, it has this big mass of gnarly bone that showed that it had a terrible infection that was probably active up until the time it died. It had injuries in its tail, and it had injuries in its face. And when we got to working on it, we did the cleaning on this dinosaur, and I wanted to take the brain case apart to try to make an endocast. And when we did that, we found that in the center of the brain case, where the brain where the brain actually would reside inside that opening within the brain case. And if you look in the center of the brain case, you can see this kind of whiter colored mixed with black little worms or whatever. That turns out that is actually the remnants of a bone forming cancer. This is an animal that had a tumor. The first evidence of cancer, as far as I know, in a dinosaur. Kind of cool to see. It could have been also a bone-forming privilege to be able to collect fossils in many, many places in the world, and probably one of the most important places that I was in Peru, in the Atacama Desert and along the coast of Peru, and I went up into the mountains. But 2 of the sites that I worked at turned out to be quite important. We did this, of course, under permit with the Peruvian government, and helped to bring fossils to Lima and to install them in Lima and in the museum, in the Natural History Museum there. And in exchange for doing that, they let us also export fossils from Peru. Of course, one of the things that we collected were fossil whales. I was so excited to go to Peru, and collecting a fossil whale didn't seem that exciting to me because they're big, and I was most interested in dinosaurs, but I could not pass up this chance to go to Peru when I was invited by my friend Kirby Siebert to join his expedition, and then we're able to get permits to work there as well. This is digging out one of these whales, and then it was kind of a lot of technicalities, I guess you say. It was a real technical challenge to try to get these things not only out of the ground. You can't buy plaster there, so we had to kind of just change the way we worked and building platforms underneath them and getting them wired to the platforms, the whales, and safely getting them loaded onto the truck and taken to the port to be put in a container was quite a monumental experience. But we got some really, really nice fossils out of doing that. This is Maya, a fossil whale, a baleen whale. And if you look closely between the jaws, you'll see there's baleen preserved. And if you look closely on that front flipper, you'll see there's skin preserved on these two, and there's spots along the skeleton where you could see that as well. This is these things are just beautifully preserved. This one is in the Gunma Prefecture in Gunma, Japan. And probably one of the coolest fossils that we were able to find there, with the help of Carlos Martin, our Peruvian guide, if you will, is a whole brand new family of whales. This particular family has just been named Odobenecetops. They're really look like a walrus. In fact, when we dug it up, I thought, man, a walrus, but it's weird. But you know, we shouldn't have walrus. This is Southern Hemisphere. There are no walrus in the Southern Hemisphere. And when we got preparing it, it became weirder and weirder. And it was actually Larry Barnes from the LA County Museum, where we reposited some of our fossils, and Clayton Ray from the Smithsonian, the National Museum at the Smithsonian Institution, figured out that it was a fossil whale. And it's a tusked whale, but unlike tusked whales like the narwhal, this actually has the tusk going backwards. Just the most bizarre thing, and bizarre jaws. Just probably had a life like somewhat like a walrus, where they would suck the clams out of clamshells. I guess one of the most cool things that I was able to do is to rediscover the Talar Seeps, which were explored in the 60s and in the 50s and 60s by the Royal Ontario Museum. And I was able to rediscover that, and actually dug the rest of two lenses that were there. One of the lenses at the very bottom, I found the first associated and partially articulated skeleton of Smilodon. Pretty exciting thing to do. Here's that skull in the ground, and you can just see where the left saber is kind of touching. You also see the front teeth of the lower jaw. So the lower jaws are right there, just a little bit disarticulated, and the skeleton went behind it. We collected the skull the first year and went back and finished collecting the skeleton. This is 1989 and 1990. And of course, Black Hills Institute, who sells fossils, finds things that they don't want to sell, like Sue, the T-Rex. And this is the Discovery Point. That's my brother Neil, pointing up at where we started digging down to the fossil, which we had, which was coming out of the cliff face, and you can see where it is down with the plaster and the tarp covering it, trying to keep the overburden away from it. As we got down to it, you can see that skeleton. There's Susan Hendrickson, the gal who found those first bones, my brother Neil, myself, and Terry Wentz. You can see the pelvis. Terry is, the guy in the blue hat is just behind the skull. That's the back of the skull you see there, that big blob. And then you can see perhaps the pelvis and the tail swinging around in one of the shoulder girdles. Turns out, of course, to be still the most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton that has been found. There's one that has a little bit bigger circumference on the femurs, so there's one that weighed more, but basically they're the same. You know, there's a maximum size to what these animals could get. Of course, we've dug other T-Rexes in our time. Our latest T-Rex is this one that we sold to the Naturalis Biodiversity Center in Leiden, Holland. This particular specimen is just a super preserved and wonderful specimen. It's got most of the uppers, almost complete uppers, and just part of the lower jaw, unfortunately. Just one part of the back of the lower jaw. But beautiful leg, and just a very, very cool fossil. Beautiful pelvis and vertebral column and ribs. And now people in Holland can see an original T-Rex. We mounted this one so you can, this has the first Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton has the original skull mounted on the skeleton. And we mounted it down low because we wanted it to be safe as well. Of course, everybody knows about Stan, the T-Rex that was here at the Black Hills Institute for a long, long time. Stan is a very cool fossil because it was the first time that anybody had ever found and properly prepared a disarticulated skull. So these are the individual skull elements, actually casts of those individual skull elements that we collected with the skeleton. And it's very important because for the first time we were able to look at how that skull was able to move in the body through what we call craniokinesis. So anyway, it's still the best Tyrannosaurus Rex skull that's been found to date in terms of being uncrushed and it has become the face of T-Rex. Whenever you see a T-Rex skull pictured in a magazine or something else, it's almost assuredly going to be a cast of Stan or the original Stan skull. Of course, we found other T-Rex. This particular one is one called Y-Rex, and it's setting not by the skeleton of the first skeleton of a nodosaur. This is Dendrosaurus that had been found also by Lee Campbell, and Alan Graffam from Geological Enterprise helped collect it, and then it was sold to the National Museum in Canada. This is a cast, and the original Y-Rex is at the Houston Museum of Nature and of Natural Science. And this is the first T-Rex with skin. That's what we know about T-Rex skin. We have about maybe a dozen small patches like this. This is only about 1 centimeter long. Then, of course, there's Bucky, the T-Rex that we sold to the Children's Museum in Indianapolis, along with a beautiful skeleton of Triceratops, probably the second best known. This one is called Kelsey. This is one that we dug on the Zerps Ranch and prepared and mounted in the museum in Indianapolis. Here's that exhibit where you see Bucky and Kelsey, the original skeletons, next to Stan, a cast. And just recently, we also installed the most complete Triceratops Hoard skeleton that's ever been found, most complete Triceratops skeleton even. This one is also at the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and it is preserved with wonderful skin as well. Also really the first Triceratops that had lots of nice skin, and something we can tell about what these animals looked like when they were alive. Many different types of skin that were found with this skeleton, and we're still working on getting those prepared so they can be published. Of course, we also found this brand new ceratopsian in the Hell Creek called Tatanka Ceratops, and Chris Ott and I described this a few years back as well. And we're hoping to get this at least a cast of the skull and stuff up in the museum, maybe even to try to reconstruct the entire skeleton. So that just kind of shows you some of the things that have happened with people who sell fossils. But I want to talk now, just give you a little brief thing about what's happened in Montana. In Montana, where we collected tricks and where the dueling dinosaurs came from, the owners of the mineral rights, of course, we had permission from the Murrays who owned the surface rights, the land and part of the mineral rights, but the other owners of the mineral rights actually claimed ownership of those fossils, saying dinosaurs and other fossils that are valuable belong to the owner of the mineral rights. So that became a court case. Oops. So again, tricks and the dueling dinos were found there. That became a court case that was filed in state court. It was moved by the Seversons, who were the defendants. They moved it to they are the ones who claim mineral rights, own the fossils. They moved it to federal district court, and we won in federal district court. They appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we lost. That's pretty bad. So we filed an appeal asking for an in-bank hearing. We also went to, I worked with the people who collect fossils in the state of Montana. We were able to get a bill introduced on behalf of the landowners and the fossil collectors into the state legislature. It passed, and get this, unanimously by both houses, unheard of anywhere, and it was signed by the governor. This before the Ninth Circuit had agreed to hear our case, and which they did, which was very, very cool. And they gave us an en-banc hearing. And if only 1 out of 100 cases that asks for an en-banc hearing, which is a hearing by the entire court instead of just 3 justices, you get 11 justices. Only 1% of those ever get heard. And just recently, about a month ago, we found out that we won. Now, the only thing that the Seversons can do is to take it to the Supreme Court. And we're still waiting for their decision as to whether they're going to or not. Fortunately, they do not have grounds to take it to the Supreme Court because it agrees with federal law. And 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 the Supreme Court won't have time to hear it. So we strongly suspect that we're going to win in the end. So all we have to do is wait them out for the 150 days and we'll have won the case. And this is important because it means that the owners of the surface rights own fossils in the ground. So I would like to invite you all to come visit our museum. Unfortunately, you can't do it today because we're closed. We're hoping to open up later this fall when we don't have quite so many people around, or we can get masked everybody and we can let people in safely. So hopefully by this time next year that we'll be open for real again, and there'll be a vaccine and we can all go out and hunt fossils and have a good time and go to museums and look at them and not be worried about catching some sort of plague. Anyway, I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention, and I'm certainly hoping that I have a chance to take some questions from you.
Thank you so much, Pete. I'm going to help Mike with reading off some of the questions as they come through the chat.
Well, I had a question. Somebody actually called me and asked me to ask you earlier. What is the current status of nano versus regular T-Rex at the moment?
Well, so there's still a big argument. I don't know why there's an argument, but there's still a big argument. I don't know if anybody saw the Discovery Channel series, Dinosaur Hunters. I was on the last episode where I got to see a new specimen that Clayton had collected. And I brought all the hand bones we had from Nanotyrannus and all the hand bones we had from T-Rex. And there were new hand bones with this specimen. We laid them all out. And literally, and I'm not talking about proportionally, I'm talking about literally, every bone from Nanotyrannus, every hand bone from Nanotyrannus is bigger than every hand bone from T-Rex. Every hand bone we know from every Nanotyrannus is bigger than every hand bone we know from Tyrannosaurus. Would have to shrink as they get older, or they'd have to shed their arms and hands and grow new ones. So and besides that, there's 47 some characters in the skull alone that tell us that it's different than Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Barbara Fight from Tampa is
that's not right. It's incorrect, but we're still fighting this battle.
Barbara Fight from Tampa is asking if you can explain a little bit about AAPS and how it helps amateurs.
So AAPS, and it used to be the American Association of Paleontological Suppliers. Now I think it's called the Association of Applied Paleontological Sciences. It started off as being an organization of people who sell fossils, but we had people who collect fossils wanted to join too, which is one of the reasons we kind of changed the name and stuff. You can go online and find it if you want to join. It's relative and stuff at the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show. The AAPS provided help with, and individuals at the APS provided help with this lawsuit. It is one of the things that allows people to collect on private land now, because if you thought it's hard to get permission from a landowner or surface rights owner, just think about what you'd have to go through to get permission from the owners of mineral rights, if you can find them, if you can find even who they are, because that's not recorded in the in the courthouse, the same place that landowners are.
Okay. Mystery Rose is asking a simple one. What's the best fossil you ever found?
Well, let's see. If it's a collaborative effort, I'd say Sue. But just me, myself, and I guess probably that associated Smilodon skeleton is pretty cool.
Okay. Any other questions coming in, folks? I don't see any. I see a lot of thank yous here on the chats. So we certainly appreciate your time. I didn't mention at the beginning, that you're on quarantine, so we did kind of have you locked down, which worked out good for us. I appreciate it. And you're also let folks know we had to, we're sorry for a little bit of delay in the voice sometimes, in the audio. We did test this out the other night. Zero problems when we tested it out. And as soon as we go live, we start having a few glitches. But we'll try to work those out in future events. Hey, Pete, were you going to say something?
Well, I'm just going to say thank you all for the opportunity to kind of share this information with you. This is, I think, something people don't think about very often, about, you know, the value of selling fossils too and buying fossils, and how we can, through collecting fossils in whatever way, we are preserving them for the next generation. And I think anybody who has an interest enough to go out and dig in the dirt because they're interested in science, they deserve big kudos and they deserve big thank yous for preserving our past. And so thank you all for your kind attention.
Well, thank you, Pete. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody who tuned in. We had about 40 people at the most. And this will also stay on. Eileen will post it so folks can watch it later on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're not a member of TBFC, please consider joining. You can get an application on the website, mail it in with an old-fashioned check and stamp in the mail, or you can email us and we'll arrange for you to pay for with credit card. Join us on Facebook. I feel like I'm an online influencer now. Join us on Facebook as well. A lot of folks are hunting in the rivers right now, where they can get in. If you are, be safe. If you're diving, be safe. The rivers are moving fast. They're dark right now. And I thank everybody for joining in, and we'll see you next month. Watch the newsletter for updates and the Facebook page, and I will see you in October, Pete.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
See you in
Bye-bye.
October.
Thank you, Eileen.
Yep, thanks for joining, everyone.